You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app. Again, code word PHNX. You'll be hearing about that later. All right, we've already got tons of comments to get to, but first, let's talk a little bit of Arizona football. We'll get our thoughts, and then we're going to hear from all of you because, again, you're the ones that make this show go. Okay, first, John Schuster, we're going to talk about the defense, obviously, throughout the show. Yes, the defense needs a ton of work, but as you and I were talking about before I came on, this is a pretty dynamic offense. And I think it's fair to say by this stage in the game with Jayden de Laura that Arizona's probably got a quarterback that you could make the case it probably hasn't had since maybe Matt Scott was here, and that he can move, he can make plays. The receivers who we're going to get to are very, very good. This is offense that is going to be able to put up points and is going to be able to get a lot of yards through the air.
And that helps them. And it's one of those games where you knew that the opposition's defense struggled. Colorado, of course, struggles across the board. But when you have situations like that, very often teams with good offensive personnel, and Arizona has improved to good offensive personnel, are able to exploit that. And that's what Arizona generally was able to do tonight. They controlled the game. They were always the better team. Offense had gaudy numbers. A lot of the specifics we can get into. De Laura has a career high. Cowan's I think caught for 180, 190 yards. They had 400 yards and 49 plays in the first half. So Arizona's offense was there. Yet I feel like this game has comma splice elements to it.
Right.
Even though the final was 43-20, which looks really good, Arizona felt to me left 17 points on the field and could have put this, instead of it being a two-possession game, which it was most of the time, seems like they could have put this game together away in the first half. This had a chance to be 38-7 in the first half, legitimately, not if everything goes right here and there. And the concern that I have moving ahead, other than every other team on the schedule is better than Colorado, is that in the first two games of the year, San Diego State and North Dakota State, one of the things that Arizona did a really good job of was limiting mistakes. Not too many turnovers, not too many penalties. Arizona doesn't have a particularly large margin of error, as we are aware. Against Mississippi State, they created some mistakes. They made some mistakes. In the Cal game, they made some mistakes. And in this game tonight, I think they had 6 or 7 penalties, and some of those penalties were huge. They also had 1st and goal at the 1, couldn't get it in. So it seemed like in the first 3 quarters, when Arizona had opportunities to do what it should have done, put this game away, they were only able to control and eventually seal the deal because they had better personnel. But if they do those sorts of things against opposition that is precipitously better, like everybody else on this schedule, then Arizona's going to be on the wrong end of those matchups, and we're going to talk about how mistakes killed them. So the frustration to me, and again, the offensive numbers, I mean, in terms of fantasy, personalities, you get this situation where you like what you see. De Laura looked excellent tonight, almost as excellent as Mike Luke does with his fancy collared shirt. And that is big time. One of us clearly was VIPing on site.
Some of us were up in the press box.
Some of us were up in the press box, and some of us were not. Some of us were wearing T-shirts and having Columbo behind us. But nevertheless, it is one of those matchups where there was enough. I don't think Arizona's as clean a team as it was in the early stages, and they can't regress from this point on. So this is a very good win. Arizona did what it needed to do in a game that was sure they get the W, which is what they needed to do. But it kind of indicates to us that, yes, Arizona's improved, but there's still a lot of work to do. And had they lost this game to Colorado, or had this been even more competitive, then you start to wonder whether Arizona's as advanced as we think they may be. But I think Arizona's clearly making strides. The talent is obviously better. I think de Laura's, if you give de Laura time, Mike, what a shocker. He's, if you got a good quarterback with skills, he's good. And that's going to be something that on the offensive end, Arizona's going to have to address in the offseason, along with the defense, as you talked about at the top. So while it's a it's a good W and a convincing W. There were issues that stood out to me as well that could have made this even more dominant than it was, and that concerns me moving ahead.
All right, everybody out there, I want to give everybody out there a big congratulations, though, because I've had a number of people from the U of A that have come up to me in the past couple days, including U of A associate head coach Jack Murphy, talking about the Back the A movement here that has gone it's on cat trans now that are going through the University of Arizona, which I was fortunate enough to see the other day. Jack came up to me and he said, let's back the A and get that victory. So again, what started out as just kind of a fun thing has really kind of metastasized in a good way throughout the community right here. And again, you guys are the reason this happened. Again, can't thank you all enough. I'll see all the back the A remarks coming in here right now. So again, you guys are all the best. Now, when it comes, I thought before the year, and we're going to get to the defense a lot because this was far from perfect, but we talked about it before the season, Shu, that, I thought that the offense, especially the passing game, was going to have to carry this team. What Arizona has right now are 3,000-yard caliber receivers. And Jacob Cowing, you could make the case I agree, get the merch out, that he's the best wide receiver. Honestly, you could maybe go back 20 years. I mean, again, we got to see more. I get it, but he's really, really good. You see Dorian Singer, he's going to catch for over 1,000 yards this year. He went over for $150 today. T-Mac, the 5-star freshman, you can tell he's coming around. And then you've got the tight end. You and I have been joking about the usage of the tight end for so many years, Shu, where people talk about, all right, well, this is the year that Arizona is going to use the tight end. Well, no, not really. It never happens. Tanner McLaughlin is a tight end that is going to probably catch 30 or 40 balls. So right there, I just named 4 pass catchers and a good quarterback that Arizona just didn't have last year. There was none of that. So while we're going to get to the defense in a second, the offense is significantly better than it was last year, and that's got to be a tip of the cap to Jedd Fisch.
Unquestionably, and the coaching staff's ability from a recruiting standpoint to significantly improve the skill set, which they've done. Now, one of the things I'm curious about, and this is one of those discussions that we always have, and it's an issue when you have limitations on both front lines. You want your offense to be balanced. You want to be able to run the football to make the pass a little bit more effective. I would not be surprised, given the skill personnel that Arizona has at the receiver position, if they decide instead to try to keep an extra blocker back, using a running back as a blocker to give de Laura more time, and to see if those skill position players, even against defenses that try to work against Arizona's passing game, are able to separate a little bit and give Arizona the offensive punch it kind of needs. Where at this point, to a large degree, Arizona isn't as interested in trying to be balanced. Right. They're more interested in just trying to move the football, and perhaps the better way to move the football is, given their skill advantages, certainly based on today's performance, through the air.
Yeah, there's a couple things, though, that especially when they get down, though, in the goal line, I do worry a little bit that they can't run the ball in tight spaces. I think you saw that. There were multiple times, especially when Arizona starts first and goal, I think it was at the 3-yard line, and they try 2 passes, then they get stuffed. That's something they got to rectify, because I think that kind of goes to your point where I think that kind of goes to the point that you were talking about right there, John Schuster, where yes, it's cool to be able to have all of this, but you also need to be able to run the ball. And while they can run the ball, I don't think they can run the ball in tight spaces when necessary. And that leaves points on the board.
Well, teams, and that's true, but teams that don't have particularly good offensive lines, and Arizona's offensive line is better. It's improved. They try. They're not, at a level that there are a lot of lines across from them that are better than they are at this stage. And that's one of the growing elements when you're trying to make teams better. The last places that you're able to fill those gaps is along the lines. There are a lot of teams out there that are okay, that have the same problem. Arizona looks like it may very well be one of those teams. As a result, we'll see how creative the Wildcat coaching staff is in trying to get things available to see if Arizona can punch it in when they get into the red zone.
Right. Have I told you about the DraftKings Sportsbook app, John Schuster, code word PHNX?
Wait. There's a wait. Now I've heard of this miraculous, magical entity called DraftKings, But you're telling me there's a DraftKings sportsbook app?
Here's what I'm going to tell you too. I'm going to go a little bit further in depth right now. Here's what you have to do. If you bet just new customers, keep in mind new customers, you bet $5 on any NFL team and you get $200 in free bets if they win. That simple, that easy. But here's where it gets better. And I feel bad because I got to read off the script because there's so much more stuff on here as well. If that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings, and DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Right now, for every leg you add, you can boost your winnings up 100% with payouts bigger than ever. Why bet anywhere else? And to make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped up same game parlays once per game day all season long. It's simple. As we talked about, the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. Again, minimum age and eligibility restrictions do apply. See show notes for details. Back the array, putting it right there. We're growing, man, and appreciate all of you guys. Also, want to tell you about Four Peaks Brewery, the official brew of PHNX. Now, you might say, where could I get that? You can get that up in Phoenix, obviously at the Four Peaks Bar, or you can come to our watch parties here for away football games at Tap and Bottle downtown, where they will have all kinds of Four Peaks deals. Again, 21 and up. Enjoy responsibly, but check it out, though, again, and check the show notes for all of the details. Now, with, by the way, Back the A-Ray is such a good name. I like that. Four Peaks Brewery is the official brewery of Kevin Sumlin. Well, you know what? I'm sure that he's probably partaking a little bit as well.
You know what? If that's true, it's good drinking.
It's great drinking, and you know what? The man probably knows his alcohol, so we'll just put it to you like that. Now, on the defensive side, we're going to flip back to the offense here. The defense, I hate saying this because I was hoping that there would be some improvement from last year. I don't know that I really see much difference in the defense. I know they forced a few other turnovers, but it does feel like teams can just kind of beat up Arizona defensively when they want. Yes, I know Colorado only scored 20 points. I get that, but you kind of got the sense that it's kind of the same unit.
Perhaps a more notable statistic is that Colorado was a little bit above its total yardage in this matchup. Right. And that's indicative of an Arizona defense not being as good as some of the other teams that they've seen, right. Which tells you, where Arizona is and how they have to improve. And the problem is going to continue to be in two facets: Arizona's inability to get pressure on the quarterback consistently, and Arizona's relative inability right. to be able to stop the run. They're going to have to do clever things to try to make up the difference. They're going to have to hope that they can force turnovers. But I think there are going to be a lot of games coming up, especially over the course of the next couple months, where, they're going to get beat up. And right. It's going to be frustrating because you want the team to be better. You know that they need to improve to make the step that the difference right now is Arizona is a team moving toward a bowl game that if their defense was a little bit more advanced, maybe could sneak into a bowl game.
Right.
And it looks like they're going to give up a lot of points. They're going on the ground. It's going to be a problem. Their ability to stop the run is going to be an issue, and they're going to have to figure out some ways to be able to alleviate that. And some of the teams on the schedule are going to be very difficult matchups for them. Again, this is year and a half. We're at a point where, Arizona's advancements are generally good, but there are still issues on the table. It's pretty glaring and clear what those issues are, and hopefully they'll be addressed in the offseason.
I wanted to go back and I wanted to ask you about something, because one of the great things about John Schuster, besides being my best friend, he's also he's a historian. He's lived that could be an indictment on me. That could be a compliment towards John Schuster.
Especially the living for a while. You were about to get into, he's been around for centuries. He remembers that. 17th century, 18th century, Renaissance, Dark Ages, Enlightenment, all of the above.
We're going to get to this in a second. I don't agree with this mindset here from Cosmic Contrarian, even though that's a great name. We're going to get back to that in just a second. But Schuster, when I'm looking at it, I look at this Arizona defense right now, and I think there's some really good young talented players, but there's just not a lot of difference makers out there. And I think at some point you kind of wonder at what point do you just start playing a lot of young guys and kind of take their lumps. And I wanted to ask you about, your historical reference with the Desert Swarm, where, yes, Dick Tomey played a lot of true freshmen, a lot of sophomores. Granted, these are guys like Teddy Bruschi, Rob Waldrop, Brandon Sanders, guys that you could go on and on that are some of the best players in school history. But did you get a sense, even though those teams struggled, that defensively they were a year or two away from being pretty good? And then I want to kind of traverse that into current day.
It felt like some potential was there. Anybody who suggests to you that Arizona's performance in 1991 when they were 4-7 was going to be a harbinger of what that defense became in 92, 93,
a harbinger of honesty?
Then it would be a harbinger of dishonesty if anyone was telling you that they had a true idea of how good that defense was going to be. But, and if you talk to our mutual pal, Anthony Gimino, who's a more in-depth historian than I am, will let you know that there were some folks who were disappointed that Arizona pulled red shirts on some of those players and wish that they had been around even potentially another year. Mm-hmm. So there, even in that regard, there was some debate, but there was clearly some athleticism there and some physicality, and the try-hard aspect of that team was obvious. Even though they took their lumps in that season, they gave it some effort and were able to hold and maybe improve a little bit as the season moved along. And about halfway through, maybe 3 or 4 games into that 92 season was when that defense started to be really scary. And so they took a step. It's not always a step. And one of the things I'm curious about the rest of this year too, we look at the progress as being, well, what happened in year 1, what happened in year 2, and what happened in year 3. Sometimes you see the light bulb work from week 4 to week 5.
Right.
You don't understand why. You don't it doesn't necessarily make sense, but something clicks and a team improves notably in the course of the middle of the year. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to see from Arizona a little bit here as things move along. So, it's what, hey, I don't necessarily disagree with your perspective. At this stage, there's still a long-term investment going on. If Arizona's defense isn't performing well enough, even though you think you have a depth chart, if there's somebody who tries harder and does something a little bit more fundamental, I don't see any problem necessarily playing that person or those people.
I think at some point you start taking your lumps a little bit, but again, Arizona's also 3-2. And I think it's important for people to be able to remember this. And I'm going to get to Cosmic Contrarian's point there in a second, but I think it's also important for people to realize that, going into this year, your over-under in Vegas was 3 wins. Over-under on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX, was 3 wins. Started at 2.5, went to 3. Arizona's
That's interesting. I know some people who got in at 2.5 and are very happy tonight.
I knew some people as well. But now I don't buy the argument too. And again, I'm not beating up on Cosmic Contrarian because, again, we appreciate everybody hopping on here. But when people say, well, you can't win another game until ASU, Arizona, if you followed Arizona football over the years, Arizona generally, when they're not just terrible, they generally beat a team that you shouldn't really beat. You look around the Pac-12, and while the Pac-12 is solid, it's not like you're playing Alabama and Georgia every single week. You've got games that are winnable. I know UCLA looked good against Washington, but UCLA also snuck out the back door against, South
Alabama. South Alabama. Yeah.
South Alabama with a with a field goal or with a field
Although
goal.
In fairness to them, they have the second longest winning streak in the country right now.
Yep, 100%.
But nevertheless, you're right. They did not look again. They did not look good again in a South Alabama game, in a game they should have lost.
Washington State, same way. Washington State barely beat UNLV. I've watched UNLV. UNLV's awful. So it's all about when you play in those games. And again, Arizona has the offense to be able to stay in a lot of games. The problem, again, will be the defense, I would assume. But I have a hard time believing that Arizona won't win one game before they get to ASU. We'll get to that ASU game in a minute. But I always thought before the year, if Arizona gets 5 wins, I don't care how it's done. I don't care how good these teams turn out to be. That is a massive step in the right direction, mainly because what Jed Fish inherited was a team that lost 20 straight games. or 12 straight games went into 20
and
straight
then added
games.
to it, and the talent from the last regime made it
Yes,
more difficult.
exactly. So you can easily sell. We already know that Jed Fish can recruit. You can easily sell that. Okay, listen, I came in here. Here's what I inherited. We brought in a top 25 class. We went from 1 win to 5 wins. Now, granted, I think next year, if you get to 5 wins, you need to be able to get into that 7-win realm. But 5 wins to me would be an A+ job, quite frankly, when you look at what he inherited and where we're at.
Yeah, Arizona's moving in a good direction.
Right.
And it's so early, you can't tell what the peak is. You can't tell how far down the road it is. It depends on, a 2 or 3 recruiting classes still ahead of it. But Fish has done a phenomenal job getting Arizona to obviously move in an appropriate direction. So that's all excellent. Do they have problems? Clearly. Could they lose the remainder of the games on the schedule? Yeah. But that's all all of those things are a possibility. But if you just look at the talent from last year to this year, Arizona clearly is better. So if you keep getting better, that's good news. And then you're moving in the right direction. You start to get depth and stack some recruiting classes. Then you're in position where you can do some positive things. Arizona is absolutely moving in the right direction. The trajectory is good. Again, there might be a lot of frustration. I expect there to be a lot of frustration over the course of the next couple months, but Arizona's direction again is good. One of the points that you were generally getting to is the tendency in this conference. It's not just Arizona; it's the tendency in this conference as a whole to be able to have an upset here and there. The Pac-12 has what I think the Pac-12 is good.
Yeah, I think it's a solid conference for sure.
I think there are 2, maybe 3 teams in this league who have 10-win talent: Utah, USC, Oregon. And then there's a bunch of teams who have 8-win talent. I think Cal's an 8-win team. Washington State, 8-win talent. They're not all obviously going to win 8 wins. But up and down the line, a lot of Oregon State's an 8-win talent team. I think Cal's an 8-win talent team. Washington State's an 8-win talent team. There, a lot of those are on that list, and Arizona plays a bunch of those from this point on. But if you're competitive at 4 or 5 win talent, which I think Arizona is, can you knock off one of those teams? Yeah, without a doubt.
And see, that's where I'm at too.
A W, and Mike, this harkens back to where I was frustrated. And I think a lot of folks were frustrated. If you're looking about last week's Cal game, had you knocked off Cal, you're staring at 4-1 right now, and then you're looking at the possibility that if you can just do a little bit, you can get into a bowl game, which is an amazing accomplishment in year 2, considering where Arizona was. It becomes a lot more difficult to pluck off multiple teams, I think, on the schedule. But is Arizona going to get one maybe here or there prior to that ASU matchup? I think that's absolutely a possibility.
By the way, our good buddy of both of ours, Matt Muehlbach, just messaged me and he said, mark it down. Arizona is going to beat USC at home. I love it. Matt Muehlbach, Mr. Triple-Double himself, putting it down. I like that. Matty M, I'm in on that one right there.
ASU is being competitive against USC tonight
in
LA.
But that's also, too, where I'm looking at. While I think the Pac-12 is is a very good conference, I don't think that there isn't a team outside of Utah. Utah, I think, is a terrible matchup for Arizona.
Yeah.
Mainly because, for obvious reasons, they're bigger, they're more, they're bigger, they're stronger. They're just, farther along than Arizona is right now, obviously. But USC, when you watch them, and I've watched them quite a bit, the one thing with USC that's fascinating is, yes, they've got a lot of physical talent. They've always had a lot of physical talent, but ASU's hanging in there with them right now. If you watched ASU this year, they're not very good. So if USC was really, the team that I think that a lot of people thought that they were going to be, this would be a game where they would be destroying ASU. So again, I don't know that I'm going as far as our guy, Matt Muehlbach, but I also don't look at that as a guaranteed loss either. The only game I look at and say, that's probably a loss is Utah.
Well, UCLA looked nasty. And the matchup aspect that UCLA bring, because UCLA wants to run the football.
Right.
And Arizona's not stopping the run.
Right.
UCLA carved up Washington last night. Washington has a better defense than Arizona does. That's not a good match.
Are you saying you're really going on a limb there, John Schuster?
Yes, I definitely am. There are a lot of teams on this schedule that, let's not get overexcited. Arizona's 3-2, and let's not get overexcited about Colorado. It's likely that Colorado is the worst team on Arizona's schedule. So knocking off Colorado is not a massive triumph that's going to catapult Arizona to a 7-game win streak. Right. We've talked about how their defense is a problem. They did very little tonight to suggest otherwise that's the case. Right. Again, are they going to pluck a game here and there? They're going to be an underdog for the rest of the year, Mike. Up until the ASU game, and I don't know what the line is on that one's going to be, but they're not going to be a favorite in any of the games they play the rest of this year. So there's a reason for that. Right. So, I think there are going to be a fair amount of difficult matchups on the slate for sure. Arizona.
Just got to get, in my opinion, though, you just got to get one. Again, you got to get.
And I would put it better than 50-50 that Arizona's going to get one of those, going to get a win against somebody before it faces ASU.
Cosmic Contrarian, here's what I'm telling you. I'm going to tell you, first of all, you should be on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. But I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to agree with John Schuster that I think it's far more likely than 50% that Arizona is going to get a win in there, just because that's generally how it is. On top of that, when you've got an explosive offense, I get that Arizona's defense isn't good, but Arizona is going to be able to put points up on about anybody. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that. Now, some games it might be 40 plus, some games it might be 30, but I think that Arizona is going to be able to put points on a lot of different teams.
And a team like USC could be a shootout. Coming into this game, USC was scoring 50 points a game. So Arizona's defense would have all kinds of problems with that matchup. But, if you make the mistake of looking ahead, Arizona at home against Oregon runs a style that's a problem. Arizona against Washington, yuck. I know Washington got throttled yesterday. Made a nice rally to make it look close, but they were overwhelmed. That's a nasty game. You got USC here, which Mulebach tells us is winnable. It's winnable because both teams score a lot of points, and SC hasn't necessarily been a consistently proven commodity on the defensive end. Utah's nasty. UCLA, I think, is nasty. Washington State's underrated. The unfortunate thing about this schedule is that they don't see Stanford and don't see Oregon State.
I know.
And I think, and Stanford, I think, is beatable because they're not very good. Oregon State, I think, is a potentially good matchup for Arizona because they're relatively one-dimensional offensively, and their quarterback isn't particularly good. So, it isn't an easy schedule. There's a lot of talent across from them, and Arizona has its work ahead to try to make things right and keep its head up, even if things get difficult, I think most of us suspect it will be.
All right, I want to tell you guys about Tap and Bottle. This is the place you need to go for all of the away Arizona football games. Tap and Bottle downtown. Scott and Rebecca, longtime friends of ours. They know Shu. Our good friend Kevin Woodman will be in town for the next one, October 15th. And all of you that know Uncle Kev, he's going to be making his triumphant return to Tucson for the weekend. So it's going to be fun to see him up there. We're all going to be up there. So again, come join us. Great deals. Four Peaks Brewery. Got all kinds of good stuff in there. Like I said, Uncle Kev's going to be in the house. He's really looking forward to it. So it'd be great for all of you to join us. We had a great showing last week. I would recommend getting there early if you can, because I would imagine that there's going to be a pretty big crowd right there. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this ASU situation right there. Oh, by the way, Jayden de Laura, we need to talk about this because I haven't done a good job of talking about this. Jayden de Laura tied my hero Tom Tunnicliffe. Ask Schuster if he remembers Tom Tunnicliffe.
Yes,
John Schuster remembers Tom Tunnicliffe. You got 6 touchdowns tonight. This is a guy that, as long as he's the quarterback at Arizona, I think they're in pretty good shape. again, when you bring in the Pac-12 freshman of the year, you expect them to be good, but sometimes you need to see things. Some things don't really, sometimes they don't pan out, but his chemistry with his receivers obviously is very good. And what he can also do is he can move around, he can extend plays, and he can make plays with his legs, maybe in a way that a little bit of a Tom Tunnicliffe did, also an undersized quarterback, John Schuster.
I think your comparison to Matt Scott is better. Tunnicliffe was a pretty prototypical old pro style pocket quarterback. Very good.
Shorter guy.
Could make all the passes.
Mm-hmm.
And had Arizona highly ranked at one point. At one point in one of Tunnicliffe's years, Arizona was undefeated and ranked third in the country before things kind of derailed on him. Mm-hmm. And Tunnicliffe was a big reason for that. Anyway.
For the derailing?
Sure. Whereas to a large degree, if you look at de Laura, it is the same situation.
Right.
And based on what we've seen so far, and we talked about this a couple post games ago, if de Laura puts up good numbers, Arizona's got a shot. If de Laura struggles, Arizona's in trouble.
Right.
And in Arizona's wins, what have we talked about? De Laura put up good numbers. In Arizona's losses, what have we talked about? Arizona struggled. In the Cal game, de Laura has a good first half and a bad second half.
Right.
And, when those things happen, it puts Arizona in a difficult position. There's still inconsistency there. But when he has time, he can make a lot of good throws, and he has plenty of good receivers to find out there to make things happen. So those are obviously positives. You want him to be more consistent, but I think a lot of the consistency here is Arizona's front line and how much pressure better teams can put on him, because then de Laura, I think, gets into happy feet panic mode a little bit. And then he makes bad decisions. He's very young. He's got to be a little bit more consistent, but he probably needs a slightly better offensive line as well.
One thing, though, that Jedd Fisch, you got to give him total kudos for, and I think this is something that he's going to really have to address in the offseason, but he's shown that he can do it, is he knows what he's doing with the transfer portal. I mean, again, the portal's obviously a thing that's totally changed college football. Jayden de Laura was obviously a big hit. Jacob Cowing has been a massive hit so far. DJ Williams at running back's been big. Hunter Eccles, Tanner McLaughlin, another guy out of the portal. So he understands the transfer portal. It's just going to be fascinating to see if he can get those guys on defense, though, like he was able to get on offense, because the thing that's exciting about this offense is it's a fairly young offense. So you got to imagine they're going to be pretty good next year. Whereas the one thing that you got to find out is, can you get some difference makers on defense? Because if you can get some difference makers on defense, then I think it makes that 7-win hope for that third year much more realistic.
Mike, why is Utah good?
Because it's a system. Every single year you get the same guys. They work out, they sit for a couple years. They come in then as a sophomore or a junior. They're a little older. They're a little more mature, and they're ready to take place of the guys in front of them that did the exact same thing.
And they have access to defensive linemen in abundance and offensive linemen in abundance. Their line makes them a 10-win football program.
No doubt.
Utah, there is no reason based on recruiting proximity,
right,
why Utah should be a top-tier program in this conference, but it is. And the reason it is because of its frontline play. It took a little while to get there, but when they were able to get depth and get that aspect of the system in line, they were a problem. When Stanford was good, why was Stanford good? They had the best lines in the conference. The great teams have great defensive line play and excellent offensive lines.
Right.
Then there's everybody else. And Arizona right now is just trying to be like everybody else. They aren't even really that advanced. Most of the teams they see from this point on are going to have better talent on the lines than they do. That's the area that every team wants to recruit. And because of that, there just aren't that many out there.
Right.
But Arizona has to figure out some pipeline ways, utilizing the transfer portal or some impressive recruiting elements to be more solid on, as they say, in the trenches. And if Arizona can make those steps, then a lot of the other stuff is going to fall into place.
Yeah, you see that makes sense too. And they've shown too that it can be done. Mike Stoops, listen, under Rich Rod, under Kevin Sumlin, there weren't good defensive linemen outside of Scooby Wright. We already know that. But Dick Tomey, it goes without saying the kind of some of the players that he was able to produce on the defensive line. You look at Mike Stoops. Mike Stoops, had a year where he had Earl Mitchell, a D tackle, Ricky Elmore, and Brooks Reed on the outside. 3 NFL players right there. It can be done. It's just those guys, like you said, you either have to have an in or you have to be able to evaluate those players. I wanted to answer a couple questions here. Fernando Parra says, is there a better combination of QBs, receivers in the conference? I don't know. I don't think so. Honestly, because I think what makes Arizona unique is that you've got 3 of them. And that kind of goes in with what Nathan Dyer asks. He said, is Cowing coming back next season? I wonder if he's ready to play. If Cowan keeps this up, I'd have a hard time believing that he would come back, mainly because he's not going to get any taller and he's catching for 150 yards each game.
And it looks like the speed element and his ability to separate makes him very appealing potentially at the next level. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. Now, William Brad Alice has hopped in here in a second. We're going to talk about that, but I also want to tell you about Game Time. Game Time is the hottest new ticketing site for all kinds of stuff. Any kind of sporting event, concerts, you name it. That's shows. That's what you do. You can save up to 60% on tickets, right? And last minute, it's great for all you procrastinators out there. And we had a guy on the post-game show. I apologize. I don't remember who it was, who said that he used Game Time and it got in and it was absolutely fantastic. If you love PHNX, then you'll love Game Time. The best way to support us is by buying your tickets through the link in the description. We all love it. We love Game Time right there. Brad Alice, miss me? We do miss you, Brad. We'd love to have you back on when you can make it, but you weren't able to make it. So
you'd better make it next week because
it's just going to be me, Brad. You're going to
yeah, the pressure is on Brad Alice.
Oh, by the way,
better show some good line play and show up.
You mentioned, I thought this was interesting. I'm going to shoot a little barb at our good friend Kevin Woodman here, who is a big David Shaw fan. Question from White Panda 10. How has Stanford gotten so bad? They were on top of the pack not long ago. I've always thought Shaw was a very average coach. I think that he inherited a very good thing that Jim Harbaugh had going there. And granted, he sustained it. But whenever I watch Stanford, I know exactly what they are going to do. There's never any outside the box thinking. It's the epitome of if it's 4th and 1 on the opponent's 40, well, they're going to punt it. You know exactly what they're going to do. It's a very conservative style. And if he doesn't get players, I don't think that he's the kind of coach that can make up for that. And I think that's where you're at right now.
I'm perplexed. I thought the precipitous fall of Stanford has admittedly surprised me. I liked what they had in place, and it seemed like they were a school. Obviously, you want to go to from an academic standpoint. That helps a great deal. But with the number of the way that they played on the line with some of their notable performers who have been successful in the NFL, you'd think that they'd be able to continue that momentum, and it just hasn't happened.
Right.
After COVID, and I don't know I don't know if COVID had anything to do with it or it sidetracked them or threw them off their game a little bit, but they just haven't recovered. And it's been a tough time up there.
I want to go on a shoe rant one here. One thing I don't like, and I'm not picking on Jed Fish here, although I am going to be picking on Jed Fish because every coach does this. I hate chasing points in the first quarter, in the second quarter of games when you miss a field or when you miss an extra point. Because every time it seemingly happens, a game that's close, if you don't get the 2 points, it comes back and bites you. I don't understand why coaches feel the need to go for 2 with midway through the second quarter. It makes no sense to me. And generally, I think it comes back to bite them in the butt more often than it doesn't. And Arizona did that today. Obviously, it didn't bite them in the butt, but I've never understood that because I don't think it works.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly, it wasn't the high point of Arizona today. And at one point, you know, what was it? 12-7 or 13-7 or something like that. And then they, it's 19-7. So I guess it was 13-7. Then it's 19-7 and they just insist on going for, just give the extra point a go.
Right.
And they decided not to do that. And then it's 19-7 and you start to get a little bit concerned about what might be. But I don't disagree with you on that front too. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to be greedy because you're constantly chasing it. And I'm sure there's a lot of algorithms and analytics out there that say that that's the way to go. But when you get into practical game situations, it doesn't seem to be a model that works. And I think to a large degree, the reason that it doesn't work as consistently is because you need a larger sample size. In basketball, in baseball, in hockey, you've got a lot of regular season games. So you can have a game work against you. Let's use hockey as an example. There are a lot of people that say, now don't try to shoot it at an empty net, just clear the puck. And the reason is that there's some analytics formula that says once you get it back into your zone, there's a slightly larger percentage that you can give up a goal and it works against you. But over the course of the season, in a game or two here, when that doesn't work, it's not that big a deal.
Right.
In college football and the pros, if the analytics work against you in 1 or 2 games, that can keep you out of the playoffs or keep you out of maybe a bowl game. So I think coaches need to be a lot more careful about some of those numbers when you just don't have when you have a lot more viability in regards to the limited sample size ahead of you. And I think that's they're really enamored with that sort of thing, but I'm not sure it works as well in football simply because of the relative limitation of games in front of you.
All right, everybody out there, over 100 comments. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Appreciate all of you in a big way. John Schuster, you're the man. You're going to be, you'll be out of town next week. So William, hopefully you can hop on. If not, it might just be me, but you know what? I've done it before. I can do that. But Arizona now 3-2 on the season. Again, as we told you before on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. If you'd taken the over 2.5, you'd be sitting pretty. But heck, even if you got in at 3, you're probably going to be sitting pretty there as well. But tomorrow I'm going to be on 12:30. Our guy Matt Muehlbach going to be coming on, talking some red blue, talking some uniforms, all kinds of good stuff. But John Schuster, as always, appreciate you, my man.
Good seeing you, man. Have a good one. Always a pleasure.
Everybody
rock
out there again.
The goodness.
Right.
Be awesome and rock the goodness.
And the collared shirt. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but
absolutely that.
Appreciate all of you guys, though. Again, you're the ones that make this happen. It doesn't happen without you. We will be back with you tomorrow. But again, thanks a ton. You have been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.